Well, in November of 2015, El Teatro Campesino will celebrate its 50th anniversary. In 1965, I went to Cesar Chavez, actually about 2 weeks after the grape strike started, and pitched him an idea for a theater up by for farm workers. And he told me that there was no money to do theater right away in Delano. There's no actors. He said there's no stage, there's no place or even time to rehearse. We're on the picket line night and day. He said, do you still want to do it? I said, absolutely. He said, what an opportunity. I virtually volunteered, essentially, actually, and slept on the floor, and they had a room there in the Pink House, which was the house behind the union office, where all the volunteers lived, and some of the people that we brought out of the fields also stayed. And the teatro essentially started in the kitchen of that house. I put together a meeting and made some signs with the cardboard and felt pens, saying Patroncito and Huelguista, that's the boss, and the striker, and the Esquirol, the scab, and the contratista, the farm labor contractor. And these were tied with string. And so I invited these people into the kitchen and told them the Teatro Campesino was coming together. Most of them showed up because they thought there was going to be a performance. So I said, no, there's no show. There's no theater yet. You're the theater. You're the show. And so I asked for volunteers and who wants to hang these signs on, and nobody really wanted to. There was a guy named Agustin Vida who played the guitar. He was the first to volunteer, and so he took on the sign that said scab, that said Esquirol, and then he started insulting them the way that we used to hear every day on the picket lines. Some of the scabs insult us, back from the fields to us. And so that someone picked up the sign that said Huelguista and put it on, and then the interchange started. And then everybody got excited, and they could see what was happening. We were just recreating the picket line. And they knew that from now, because they'd been at it now for a couple of weeks or a month by that time. So it was an explosion. It was a creative explosion. People were laughing and making fun of people that they knew, contratistas, bosses. Although not too many people could do the boss, which was really interesting. But the thing is that it was improvisation, and it was bare tax. There was nothing there. It was just the people and a few signs. And El Teatro Campesino then was born out of thin air. We did it right on the spur of the moment. It was like a little game. Sometimes some evenings after the picket line, people would just get together to amuse themselves. But eventually, I was not long after that, I was elected picket captain. So we started to do it on the picket line and getting on top of panel trucks and shouting to the scabs in the field. We also started singing songs, composing corridos, had to do with the strike. Mm-hmm. We started introducing chants on the picket line. So it made the long day out in the fields, from before dawn to late afternoon, it made that whole day a lot more interesting because there was a form and shape to the picket line that was not necessarily determined by the growers, although we still had to deal with that. It was really determined by our effort to try to communicate with them. So the picket line became an instrument of communication and provocation and really persuasion. That was we were a nonviolent strike, so we had to persuade the workers to come out of the fields. So Caesar was right. There was no time for anything but the picket line, and so that's where the Teatro Campesino was born, right on the picket line. And that was almost 50 years ago now, 48 years ago, as of now. And I always had intentions of becoming a playwright. That's what I went to college to study. I was an English major. I was a math and physics major actually before that. I got a scholarship to go to San Jose State based on my strength in the sciences. And I really wanted to go into research. I wanted to be a research scientist, but That wasn't in the cards in the 1960s, or 1950s even, because I started college in 1958. That wasn't in the cards for, one, a Chicano, but two, especially someone that was coming from the West Coast. I needed to go to Yale, I needed to go to MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, I needed to go to Harvard, in order to be able to come out with those kinds of credentials. And I needed a PhD, and I couldn't afford to go to school that long. So I got a degree in English with an emphasis in playwriting, and began to think about how I was going to make a living in the theater. I moved up to San Francisco, this is 1964, and I'd all written plays in college at San Jose State. I wrote The Shrunken Head of Pancho Villa, which was produced. I wrote and directed that at San Jose State. That was my first full-length play, and that attracted some attention. So I thought I might take that play up to San Francisco, see if we get it produced, and there was no way, I couldn't find anybody. But I joined the San Francisco Mime Troupe and performed in the parks and learned a lot about Comedia dell'arte and performing outdoors for the public on the weekends. And really, without getting paid, we used to get $5 a performance. So really, I was on my own economically, but I loved being part of that company and learning so much in a short space of time. So I brought those techniques with me to Delano. And El Teatro Campesino then was born out of Comedia dell'arte techniques, but also the culture of the workers themselves. We opened that up so that Cantinflas, the presence of Cantinflas came through almost right away, particularly in one of the founding members, a guy by the name of Felipe Cantú, who, with Agustin Lira, who could play the lira, who could play the guitar, could also write corridos, but he was funny. He was a natural genius. From Mexico, from Nuevo León, by way of Texas, and he had been everything in his life, but he was still a campesino. And he had 7 children, a wife and 7 children. But he joined us too, and he began to perform, and so he brought in Cantinflas. We used to call him Cantuflas. He was Felipe Cantú, so he's Cantuflas. And then others that came and went, within the company itself. And in 1967, we went independent of the union and set up as a farm workers cultural center in Del Rey. But really, we were trying to be on our own footing as a theater company. And by that time, we were touring a lot, and began to go to the universities and colleges, and really became one of the first sparks of the Chicano movement, because we were carrying that consciousness into colleges, and a lot of students had never seen that, and so they were really set on fire, by our performances, and they were already starting to organize Cinco de Mayo celebrations and stuff on campus, and so that became a real vehicle for us to spread the word and to communicate that energy. And so the teatro evolved. It went from being made up of farm workers and striking farm workers to the children of farm workers. We eventually ended up, we went from Delano to Del Rey. We were in Del Rey about 1.5 years. And then from Del Rey we went to Fresno, and that was another 1.5 years or 2 years in Fresno. And then in 1971, 6 years into our history, we moved to San Juan Bautista, and we've been here ever since. That was 42 years ago, and we've been working out of here for all these decades, going on tour across country, even to Europe and Mexico. I've taken trips to Japan, to the Philippines, representing the teatro, and life goes on. We're into about our 3rd generation of actors and writers and directors. People have come through here that have gone on to, if not on to education, to higher education, like the Yale Drama School, then back to Hollywood, and we've made movies here, and that's been the introduction for a lot of people into the world of film and or television. And so we continue to work on that level. We continue to try to stay true to our origins, which was to help the farm worker and to prove that campesinos are not beasts of burden, that they're human beings endowed with all the creative genius, that human beings are heir to, and that it doesn't matter who they are, where they come from, they've got the spark. And so we continue to prove that, year after year.
How is it